Everybody, welcome to another conversation. It's John and I here with Stanley Livingston. Livingston, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
I'm doing great. I went
I'm doing
back
good.
and revisited My Three Sons today because I hadn't
Oh,
seen
really?
it.
All 380 episodes?
No. Just a couple at the
Poor
beginning.
guy.
I think I'm going to go through the series as soon as I'm done with Family Ties because I like to have a sitcom that I can rely on while I'm watching some of the other more dense shows that are out now. So I think that's going to be my next one.
Well, that was a pretty durable show. It just celebrated its 60th anniversary on TV on September 29th. So I guess it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. So you've lived in California your whole life?
Yeah, born and raised. I was born in Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. Grew up on the streets of Hollywood and pretty much been in Southern California my whole life. And Hollywood, I'd say about 65 years of it.
Awesome. So what made you want to get into acting at such a young age? Like, was it something that you wanted to do? Did parents take you for an audition?
No, it's something I think I was drawn to, right from the moment I started school. I just knew I wanted to be in all the shows, singing and dancing and making a fool out of myself. And I think my parents saw that, and they probably had no idea about how to do it professionally. I went to a swim school in Hollywood when I was really young. And it turned out the pool was frequented by a lot of Hollywood celebrity types, agents, managers, actors. Anyway, all their kids were there learning how to swim. And there was an agent that took a shine to me. I was cute, extroverted, and I guess she thought I'd make a good candidate to become a kid actor. And she kept after my mom to represent me. And finally, my mom said, okay, let's see what happens. And so I went out on some things. I was cast earlier in my career as an extra. That's kind of pretty much how everybody starts. So just one in a bunch of kids. And that happened to me also on a show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which was a well-known popular show back in the 50s that ran for about 14 years. In fact, it's the only show or sitcom that ran longer than My Three Sons. But I was hired as an extra, and for whatever reason, the first episode I did with Ozzie and Harriet as an extra, he gave me a line to say, and I guess I said it successfully, and he went to my mom afterwards, said, gee, I'd like to have him back. Can you leave your contact information? And true to his word, from 1956 to about 1960, I probably did about 3 or 4 shows, Ozzie and Harriet as a neighborhood kid, till My Three Sons came along. And then by that point, I was doing movies and, different guest spots on different TV shows. So I had amassed a pretty good resume. Just before My Three Sons started, I starred in a TV pilot called Skippy that ended up not selling to TV, but was under contract. The producer director who did it was Jackie Cooper, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was probably, besides Shirley Temple, the most famous child actor ever. In fact, he was nominated for an Academy Award for Skippy. And when I met him, what happened was I was wandering around the lot when I wasn't in scenes on Ozzie and Harriet just to have something to do. And, you'd go on to different people's sound stages and see what was happening. And one of the stages I walked onto, it turned out they had a horse there. And I followed the horse and the trainer out into the back. And the guy said, hey, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm doing Ozzie and Harriet. He said, you want to feed the horse? So he gave me some carrots to feed the horse, showed me how to brush the horse down. Well, turned out the horse was Mr. Ed. So
Whoa.
I didn't know that at the time, but that was kind of fun. And so, that, and I walked onto another soundstage where they had a dog, a basset hound, and was playing with him, and I'd come over occasionally. And one of the times when I was there, this guy came up to me and started talking to me and inquiring who I was and why I was there. And so, my instincts were to say, gee, am I in trouble? And he said, no, you're not in trouble. He said, gee, I'd like to meet your mom. So I thought I was in trouble. And anyway, he made me take him back over to the Ozzie and Harriet sound stage 5, to meet my mom. And anyway, I kind of wandered off, and they stood there talking for a while. And then about 2 months later, the same guy was producing, directing me in Skippy. It turned out it was Jackie Cooper. So that came about, and anyway, Skippy led to My Three Sons. I, had a nice reel of a TV series that I starred in and had my name above the title and had most of the dialogue and carried the show. And so the people that saw that were very interested in me when they were starting up My Three Sons. Anyway, so I got cast in that, and then I had to wait around till they cast everybody else except for Fred McMurray because the show was built around him. So it took a while, but we finally got William Frawley, the guy that played Bub, and then Tim Considine, who was he was part of the Mouseketeers Club. He was in Spin and Marty and the Hardy Boys back then, and he was hired to play the older brother Mike. And finally, we were looking for a middle son, and they got the guy that was on a TV series back then called Fury with Peter Graves. And we started shooting, and then the next thing I knew, we weren't shooting anymore, and he was gone. And then they got another guy, and we started shooting again, and then they didn't think that guy could do comedy, so they fired him. And my mom knew this agent and said, she called up Mary Grady was her name, said, gee, they're looking for another Robbie. You should send Don down. And he came down and auditioned. And ultimately we shot the pilot with Don Grady, who became Robbie. And that was the lineup. Then we finally had three sons and a pilot. And, the guy that couldn't do comedy, that turned out to be Ryan O'Neal.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was a few little missteps along the way. In addition to the show, in the first iteration of it not really being called the Douglases, Chip Douglas, Steve Douglas, Robbie Douglas, we were the McPhersons. And on that third go-round, they changed the name to Douglas.
Has a better ring to it, Douglas, than McPherson.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
How old are you when you get the job for My Three Sons?
I was 9 years old when we did the pilot. We did the pilot at the end of 1959 and waited around for a while. And then I guess for them to make a decision on it. Of course, I think they'd already decided. This is primarily because of Fred McMurray's participation in it, which, that sounds kind of boring now when I say it. But when Fred McMurray came to TV to be Steve Douglas, it was like unbelievable to have a star of that caliber going to do a TV show. I mean, he was a major movie star. And everybody was like, why is this guy doing a TV show? Well, he had his personal reasons for doing it, but it would have been like maybe about 8-10 years ago, Tom Hanks saying, I'm not going to do any movies anymore. I'm just going to do TV series. And everybody like, what? And that's what Fred McMurray was. He was the highest paid actor at that time and done probably 100 movies up to when My Three Sons came along. And he and his wife had adopted twins. And they were, I guess, probably about 7-8 years old by then. And, he didn't want to go on the road doing movies. Sometimes you're out there for 2-3 months at a pop, and next thing you know, your kids are in college. So he decided he wanted a regular job where he can go to work from 8 to 5, be home, spend the evening with his kids, his weekends with the kids. And then the shooting schedule on My Three Sons was set up. So he would shoot for about 2 or 3 months and then go away for about 2 or 3 months and spent the entire summer with his family. And then would come back at the end and, we'd shoot out any episodes that hadn't been shot and did pick up shots for ones he was in, but they hadn't finished. And that's how the producer got him to agree to be in the show.
I was watching the episode today where the neighbor girl or the girl down the street has a huge crush on Chip, and the chemistry that you and Fred McMurray have in that first few episodes is amazing. Yeah,
the pilot was really cute. It was him. There was a girl that liked me. It started out that way, and I didn't like her because I don't think I quite like girls yet. They were just these clunky things that wanted to hold you down and kiss you. And but I got invited to a dance, and then I got a lecture from him that even though I didn't really want to go, it was going to be good for me and to meet women and just socialize. But then he gets, so to speak, hoisted on his own petard because this woman who likes him, a divorcee, wants him to go out with her. And so Bub, I think it was, said, well, why don't you just take her and go with Chip, to this dance, and you can be with her. And he's like, yeah, so he gets roped into the same situation I'm in. and we go to the dance, and needless to say, I'm ready to kick the girl in the kneecap and get the heck out of there after about 5 minutes. And it doesn't look like he's having all that much fun with this woman. So we eventually just kind of split.
What's it like growing up on TV? Because My Three Sons lasted 12 years.
Yeah, we shot 12 years, 12 seasons. Like I was saying, making it the second longest running sitcom on TV. I think there's a few that have come to 12 now, but they don't have 380 episodes.
Right. Yeah.
So, ran a long time, and immediately in 73, I guess, when it finally went off after they aired the last year's worth of segments, it went into syndication, and from 73 through 85, it was on TV every single day, when they did what they call stripping, playing it over and over again. And then from there, I think it was in 85, Nick at Night came along, and they had the idea of taking our old black and white episodes and putting them on TV and introducing them to a whole new crop of audience, which are pretty much the children of the original parents who watched the show with their kids. And then 10 years after that, they came along with TV Land, which was kind of what Nick at Night was. Nick at Night ran primarily from midnight to about 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning. But then they started the 24-hour programming thing with old-time TV shows that the networks just looked at that content and said, this is junk. We don't show it anymore. Let them knock themselves out if they want. And I guess they struck a deal. And, TV Land and Nick at Night really, well, they basically showed that old-time TV content could be very valuable. In fact, the guy that started the company that, ended up owning Nick at Night and TV Land, a guy named Sumner Redstone, made enough money off putting that on his little cable channel that nobody thought would succeed, that he ended up buying the network that made it. He bought CBS, and with the pocket change left over, bought Paramount. So, there's gold in them there old residuals and old-time TV shows. So, who knew? And flash forward, it's 60 years later, and My Three Sons has literally been on the air for 60 years, some way, shape, or form, primetime, cable, various independent channels. It just literally never gone off the air.
I wish they'd make a streaming service dedicated to old TV, because they have channels, but you can't find Mr. Ed, you can't find My Three Sons on any of the streaming platforms, and I think that's a shame, because I want to binge.
Well, they kind of come and go. Yeah, that's what happens. And we were on after TV Land. We've been on so many different, the Ion channel and like Hallmark channel, all these different channels that popped up and were popular for a while and peaked, and then somebody else said, I think we're on MeTV right now. So there are hosts at the moment. But, at this point, I think you can probably go to YouTube and find every episode of My Three Sons. They're finally all up. Yeah.
That's what I found.
And depending what year you see me, I'm either, 8 or 9, or I could be almost 23, I think. So, that's what's funny when I meet kids, because if they've only seen the younger episodes of me, you walk into a room and, they're looking at this old geezer walking in going, well, that's Chip. What happened to him? So
I have 2 questions real quick, Stanley.
Sure, yeah.
So going back to Fred McMurray, were you at all intimidated to work with him? Like when you first started the show, or were you so new that you kind of maybe didn't even recognize that?
You know what? It's not even that. It's just that you're, when you're a kid, you're just not aware of anything. You have no real, I think, appreciation of people's status in the industry. When you get older, you suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm in the room with the president or the president of CBS or whatever, and that can be intimidating. When you're a kid, you just treat everybody the same. He was just the guy that was on the show to me playing my dad, and it wasn't like I was sitting there going, oh my God, this is the guy who was in Double Indemnity, The Apartment, The Absent-Minded Professor, Cane Mutiny. You just don't have those thoughts. So, and he was just, for as big an actor as he was just really the most down-to-earth guy you ever met. I never really saw Fred lose his temper or have a histrionics or a meltdown on the set about anything. That's not to say there weren't problems, but he handled them in the most low-key way. He'd say something to the director and see if they could get it resolved. If not, they would call the producer, would call a writer down, and they may disappear for about a half hour working on some dialogue that didn't make sense to him. And but he always handled things, I thought, with the utmost professionality.
You described the shooting schedule that was kind of a little bit, fractured, for lack of a better term, when you were talking about Fred McMurray. Did that cause any type of problems with the crew or the cast if they had to wait for Fred to come back to do some pickup shots? Like, I imagine the organization had to be top notch in order to make sure that everything fit together, right?
Yeah, well, the people that produced the show, meaning, the crew and the production crew that ran everything, when you do films, even when you're doing feature films, they're not shot in order, any particular order, because of people's schedules or the availability of locations or just props sometime, whatever. So you're always shooting things out of order. So this was just kind of shooting things out of order on steroids because of Fred. The way it worked is, in those days too, we shot a lot more episodes per season. That's why we ended up with almost 400 episodes. We do 39 episodes a year. So you would have 39 original episodes, and then they would only take 13 of those episodes and rerun them. That's all our reruns, I guess, season would be, because if you added the 39, there's your 52 weeks. So there was a lot of shows originally that were never even seen a second time until Nick at Night came along. But the way it would work was we'd have maybe 13 scripts ready at the beginning of the season. Those are the ones we would dig into right away. And when Fred was there and available, it's not like he didn't work. He was in every single shot during the day. We would shoot the master, and then they would go immediately and get his close-up, or if he was in a two-shot, whatever it took to shoot him out of that particular scene. And then a lot of times they would skip over the other people's. If I was in it, my close-up wouldn't be shot sometimes till, it could be 6 months later when he was gone. So they tried to shoot out as much stuff with Fred as they could, and did that for, like I said, about 2 or 3 months. He'd leave, and then, we'd shoot new stuff and scenes without Fred McMurray, but then we would also do pickups and go back to that scene. And a lot of times it'd just be, me at the dining room table or at the kitchen table with, a plate of eggs in front of me. And that's what I was eating in that scene that we shot 3 months ago. And, they just matched my looks to where I was supposed to be looking for him. But he wasn't there. It was just the dialogue coach would usually read the offstage lines, or if it was a scene where I was looking up to him and he was standing up, they'd put her on an apple box because Fred was about 6'4". So, or we used to have this other thing to keep the eye line straight. They would hold up a mop. We used to call it Fred McMop. To get the eye line straight and go, just look at the head of the mop and do your lines to the mop, So I'm very good when it comes to acting with mops now. Should put me in, what was it? I guess it was Mary Poppins, where Dick Van Dyke does the scene with the thing to clean out the chimney with. I'd probably be very good acting against that mop or broom or whatever it was.
Did I read correctly that your brother had a role as well on My Three Sons?
Oh, yeah. Barry came along. I started in the industry, like I said, when I was probably about 6 years old, and my little brother wanted to do what I did, so he followed in my footsteps. He's 3 years younger, so when I first started, he was still in a diaper practically, but eventually caught on, hey, this is a good gig if you can get it, and he wanted to do the same thing I was doing. And he was equally as talented and looked very much different than me. I had blonde hair. I looked like the pure Aryan race, or my brother looked like Mr. Moto or something. Peter Lorre. He had glasses, buck teeth, and so he had a completely different look. But he was adorable looking, and he looked like he'd be very intelligent. He was the original brain, the quintessential brain. And he started working, and same thing happened for him. He got some TV shows, did a couple pilots that didn't sell. He was in The Errand Boy with Jerry Lewis. I had a great scene in that where those kids are asking Jerry Lewis to get the candy down off the shelf. They want like I think a dime's worth of jelly beans, and he goes up and gets this humongous vase down and scoops out 10 cents. And he says to the little girl, do you want these? And she's, do you want 10 cents? He goes, no. So he puts it back and goes, well, what do you want? And she goes, I want 5 cents worth of those. So he has to go up again and get them. And then before he turns around, he says to my brother, do you want 5 cents worth of these jelly beans? And my brother says, no. And so he puts them back and he says, okay, what do you want? He goes, I want 20 cents worth of those jelly beans. So that was the gag, something like that anyway. But yeah, he did a lot of movies. And, when he wasn't working, he would come down to actually, we worked together before that on the Ozzie and Harriet show.
Okay.
The very last episode of Ozzie and Harriet that I did, because by that point my parents had to tell Ozzie I got hired onto My Three Sons and was not going to be able to come back because it was on a different networks. And those days they didn't allow such things. So, but the very last episode I was in, Barry got cast into it too. And in fact, I think they actually called us by the same last name. So I guess that was supposed to identify that we were brothers. And so I left to do My Three Sons, and Barry basically took over the role I had. Whenever they needed a neighborhood kid, it became Barry, and he was on that show for about 3-4 years and did the same thing, about 3-4 shows a year he would do for the Nelsons, and he was doing TV pilots. So by then the producers of My Three Sons were aware of him, and he come down to the set to hang with me sometimes, and I think they just got the idea, hey, why not use Barry in something? So they wrote it in that he was a neighborhood kid on My Three Sons, and slowly but surely he was sort of weaseling his way into the show, so to speak. And he'd be in my classroom, which I never could figure that part out because I'm 3 years older than Barry, so either he was very intelligent or I was very stupid because we were in the same classroom. But that was TV, so go figure. But then what happened on the show was Tim Considine, the guy that played the older brother Mike, decided he didn't want to come back the 5th year and wanted to move on with his life and gave notice. And anyway, they shot one episode with him where he got married, and we went to the marriage, and then we never saw Mike again. He just sort of slipped into the Twilight Zone, never wrote, never called. What a bum. Anyway, so they came up with this idea because the show was called My Three Sons. We needed 3 sons in a hurry, and Barry was right there and was kind of an obvious choice. And they had written a scenario where he was an adopted kid, actually a foster child, and his parents were supposedly leaving the United States and they couldn't take him, and he's suddenly up and available for adoption. So the Douglas family decides to adopt him and formally brought him into the family. And on the side, the little social worker that was handling the case was Vera Miles, and Fred McMurray's character and her have a little flirtation. And if you miss those 5 episodes, you never know what happened to Mike and how this other guy got on the show. So,
you didn't have any sibling rivalry, did you, while you were on set?
We didn't. No, the funny thing is, because we worked enough during the year that I think my parents thought maybe we shouldn't work when we're not doing My Three Sons, although we both did. I ended up doing a movie called X-15 with Charles Bronson in between seasons one year. In fact, it was introducing Mary Tyler Moore, so she was in it. Charlie Bronson was just starting to catch fire. In fact, right after that movie, I think he did The Great Escape, and and also what was the other one he was in? Magnificent Seven. That sort of solidified his career. But and then the director turned out, he went on to have a huge directing career, but this was his first movie, and it's been a friend of mine for, God, I guess 60 some years, Richard Donner. That was his first feature film. And, Richard went on to do The Omen and Superman and all the Lethal Weapon movies. Great guy, great director. So, yeah. Oop, my watch just said something to me. Somebody's watch did. So we did things in between, and I ended up doing How the Westers Won between one of the seasons, which turned out to be one of the quintessential Westerns. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was shot in Cinerama. It was actually the last Cinerama movie produced, and it had everybody who was anybody in Hollywood at that time was in this movie. Everybody. John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, Gregory Peck. I mean, you name it, they were in it. Debbie Reynolds was the star of it. And they play it almost every year at the ArcLight Cinerama Theater in Cinerama once a year. So like My Three Sons, it's gone on and on and on and on and on. In fact, over the years, because of the attrition rate of the movie, I think I'm the only one left alive in it. So I've had the honor of introducing that film at the ArcLight probably about 5 or 10 times by now. But it's a great film too. But yeah, mainly we would go back to school, and unless we did do a movie or something would come up, but no, most of the time we'd go back to school. And unlike most of show business children who went to a private school in Hollywood called the Hollywood Professional School, which catered to children that were in TV series or working in the industry or whatever. You went to school there from 9 to 12 and then you were done. We had a tutor after the series would end, which was usually around the end of the year, that would take us to February. And then from February to when we'd start shooting again, usually 3 or 4 months, we'd go back to public school, which was a pretty
culture
awesome
shock
experience. It'd be like if you were the Beatles at that age and you got to work and then all of a sudden you had to go back to public school. You can imagine what it would have been like. It was, pretty horrendous. But, my parents go, well, we're sending you back there because you're going to, end up having to deal with real kids. So you're going to have to learn how to handle it. Where if you went to Hollywood Professional School, you're just in with a bunch of your own ilk who, not to say that their heads were a little swollen by being in show business, but there's nothing like being with real kids. They'll knock you right off your pedestal and keep you real. And you learn how to deal with the real world, how to manipulate kids so that they're nice to you. And when I went back, either guys were my friends or they wanted to beat me up. That's how it was. So it was good for getting girlfriends, I'll say that worked out.
Well, Stanley, you've also done some directing, you've done some producing as well in your career. So if I could just maybe put you on the spot, if you were given an opportunity to do like a dream project, like Stanley, we want you to direct and produce this, what would it be? What would be a project that you would love to work on and have your name attached to?
Oh, are you saying from films that got made that I didn't get to direct, or of my own? It
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Anything.
Yeah, I've got I have a project actually. There's one that I wrote too that I had some luck with it years ago, and it sort of became my calling card for a while. And it got optioned. I think it was 3 or 4 different times. At that time, well, it's called The Tower, and what the story was about. It took place in 1938, and it's about some con men who sell the Eiffel Tower as scrap metal to German industrialists right before World War II, when the Krupps and other armament companies were buying up all the scrap metal and steel all over Europe, knowing the war was coming. And it's I guess you'd say an action thriller with a dose of comedy in it, and a lot of things going wrong, a lot of twists and turns. But that script was lucky for me. I had an option, made money off of it. I mean, almost made a living off of it there for a while. And got my first writing agent because of it, but it just ultimately didn't get made. It would have, when it was around being offered, it would have been a tough shoot. I when I look at it now, having worked as a producer and knowing some of the nuts and bolts of that, because it was a period piece, so it had that as a strike against it. It was, I would say, 95% foreign, so it required shooting in Paris. So that was strike 2. So. But the story was so compelling, everybody that read it, loved the story. And, the problems that you would have had with it back in the era when I wrote it, which was around 1980, there'd be no problem at all. Some kid out of a college class could probably erase wires and do some things right there at home on After Effects to, cure the problems you would have had back then that would have legitimately taken a little bit of work to rotoscope things and all that. So it would be a nothing shoot. But yeah, it's a high octane thriller, and has a lot of twists and turns with these con men who end up getting sucked into their own con, which isn't supposed to happen, and ultimately end up at the Eiffel Tower when it's ready to be exploded.
Awesome. That sounds like a great script. That does. Fantastic.
Absolutely. I gotta ask, is a movie that I used to watch, well, that me and my friends would watch at summer parties in middle school and high school. Can you give me a quick story on Bikini Drive-In?
Well, it would be very short because I think my participation in it was very short. I think we were mocking or had like Uncle Charlie supposedly in the car. You don't see him, but you hear his voice. And I've got I think he's the one with the girl. And I'm up front in the car with some other girl, and we're like, "Hey, Uncle Charlie, could you knock it off? We can't hear the movie." It was like a lark. You're friends with different people in the industry, and the guy that directed was a friend of mine. Said, "Hey, you want to just do this, kind of foolish scene in there?" And I said, "Yeah, I wasn't doing anything." In fact, that was shot, now that I think about it, over David Carradine's ranch.
Oh.
The part in the car. I mean, you couldn't really see much out there, but that's where it was actually shot. Yeah, we all help each other with our projects. Things go wrong, or no. I did a tackle the 60-foot centerfold, I think it was called. A friend of mine who was the director called me, and I don't know what happened. They had an actor that got sick or bombed out. I don't know what it was. And he said, "Hey, you think you could do this?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not really acting anymore." And he goes, "Can you just do me a favor?" I'm like, "Well, what is it?" And he told me, and I said, "Yeah, okay." And I said, "So when is it?" And he goes, "Tonight." He said, start shooting about 2 a.m. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what?" Yeah. So I ended up in that because of that. I think we shot all my scenes out in like one night, and you do what you can to help your friends. And
Absolutely. They should have given you a spot in Cable Guy.
That was kind of weird too, because it was somewhere, and I think at that time having a dispute over some kind of residuals or something with CBS. And in those days too, if they used you in a production, whether they used you or used to clip you, they're supposed to call you and get your permission, and you sign off on it, and negotiate a fee. And I remember somebody called me and said, "Oh, we want to use this clip you in the Cable Guy." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, great." And of course I knew who Jim Carrey was, so I was delighted about that. I didn't know what they were going to do with it, but so the guy made an offer to me, and I go, "Oh," I said, "Come on, man, this is the movie where Jim Carrey's getting $20 million. You're gonna have to come back with a little bit more than scale on this. This isn't like some, like something being inserted into the TV screen that the Munsters are watching on some TV show. This is a $20 million movie." So I said, "Come back with a different number, and maybe we can negotiate something." I never heard back from the guy. So flash forward about a year later, I'm at Paramount. I think this was around the time they launched TV Land, and so I was there, and some lady came up to me and said, "Oh, wow, I just came from screening, of the Cable Guy, and you were so cute. They had a clip of you in there." And I said, "Oh, wow, well, that's cool." So I said, "Well, the weird part about it is nobody ever called me back to clear that clip. And the movie opens, what'd you say, on Friday?" I go, "You better have somebody from your legal department call me." And this lady turned Snow White. And anyway, I heard from somebody, and we negotiated a much better deal than I would have ever imagined. In fact, the deal was so good, I made more money off that Cable Guy clip than I made off the entirety of my Three Sons clips on cable for 20 years.
Wow.
So that tells you how little I made from my Three Sons, or how much I got for one clip.
That's wow.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing.
Yeah, that was pretty weird. But I don't know what happened. I guess it fell between the cracks. And now it's all different now. Now they don't even have to call you. And I'm like, "What? Excuse me? They don't have to call you anymore?" And so I called the guest. She says, "Yeah, we gave that away at the last negotiation. So people can just use a clip of you. They don't have to call you to clear it. Then you have to tell you they're using it. And oh yeah, they don't have to pay you." I go, "Well, that's really nice of you." I go, "Why do I need a union?" I go, that's almost like not having a union. But yeah, I called back to their legal department to see if that was true, and spoke to an attorney, and he said, "Yeah, that was one of the things we gave away. And I go, but I don't understand how you can negotiate somebody else's likeness away. It
Yeah.
seems like there's a copyright issue. I own my likeness. It's not for you to give away. And so I said, well, that remains to be seen. You can say that, and you can tell that to other producers who are ultimately going to use it, but till it gets taken to court and maybe there's a trial and there's a jury or a judge decides, I don't think you're right. But and then I asked the guy, because I wanted to put him on the spot. I said, I'm doing a commercial right now. And I said, are you a good looking guy? And he said, what? And I said, well, are you a good looking guy? He goes, well, I guess I'm pretty good looking guy. I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, could you send me a picture of you? I said, because I'm doing a gonorrhea commercial next week, and we're looking for some guy to be the gonorrhea guy, and I think I'm going to use you. And the guy goes, I get your point. And I says, yes, you get my point. Because if you can be, if it's for free for people to use, it will be abused. And that's what I'm talking about. That's why you can't do that. So I haven't tested it yet, but I was happy to put the guy on the spot.
Well, Stanley, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. This has been an absolute
Had a
delight.
good time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Online.
What's that?
Where can everyone find you online?
Well, I have a website. It's stanleylivingston.com. And I have to admit, I haven't been there in a while to update it. So it's probably going to be getting around to this since the COVID thing is here and I can't come up with another excuse. And I've done quite a few things that I probably should put on there to update it since I last did. And then on the production side, I have it's a company called First Team Productions. So if you go to firstteamproductions.com, you can see what I'm involved in, although everything right now is just on ice.
Yeah.
Like everybody else's thing because of that COVID thing. It's impossible to get COVID insurance. So you're on your own out there. And if somebody gets sick on one of your productions or God forbid dies, I don't even know legally what, you'd probably be in a world of hurt. So we've just been holding back doing anything or moving forward on anything till we get a better grip on whatever this is going to ultimately be about, or hopefully they'll come up with a vaccine and that'll be the end of it so people can work and not have to worry about contracting something. It's a pretty sad state of affairs.
Yeah,
absolutely. So all the links to Stan's social medias and websites and stuff will be in the description of this video. Thank you again, Stan, for coming on. It was an absolute honor. I love talking to you about it.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks
yes,
again.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
You guys were great to talk to, and we'll have to do it again.
Okay.
Hopefully something.